Hello, hello. Welcome to the Wellness on Purpose podcast, where our intention is to provide you with impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. This podcast shares insights to current health trends with industry and brand leaders in the health and wellness world. This podcast is brought to you by Joanne's Place Health Foods from Peterborough and Lindsay, Ontario. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. Today, we dive deep into the often underestimated impact of stress and chronic inflammation on our health and well-being. I'm your host, Marissa Laughlin, and today I'm joined by a previous guest, Irene Pauline from Living Alchemy. Living Alchemy is on a mission to support Canadians by alleviating symptoms and providing natural solutions to unresolved long-term problems through the creation of fermented organic whole food supplements. I will let Irene share more about the amazing Living Alchemy brand later in this episode. But if you're listening and you can resonate with having high levels of stress, a dysregulated nervous system, and maybe suffering with some inflammatory conditions, stay here. Join us for this episode, and let's get you back on track starting today. So join me in welcoming Irene on to today's podcast. Hello, Irene. Welcome back to the Wellness on Purpose podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Marissa. It's always such a pleasure to join you. And I just love all our pre-chats and our post-chats and just this whole session together. So I feel like it's going to be another good one.
Yes, always. It's such a great, easy conversation with you, which I appreciate so much. And I'm sure our listeners are very familiar with you and also Living Alchemy, but we are always getting new listeners. So I'd love for you to take a minute just to introduce yourself and also speak to Living Alchemy as a brand who you are here on behalf of today.
So yes, I'm Irene Pauline Humpelstetter. I'm a certified nutritional practitioner, and I am also the director of education with Living Alchemy. And Living Alchemy is all about fermented supplements. So living culture, traditional ways of fermenting organic whole foods and whole herbs into these therapeutic supplements. And these are the solutions that are really helping a lot of people cope in their day-to-day. And really, that's where kind of we're getting into an exciting topic. So let's jump into that one.
Yes, we're going to talk about formulations later in today's episode, but we need to discuss the biggest concern that we are seeing amongst Canadians right now, and that is stress. It is something that is at the forefront of everyone's life right now. Everyone can relate to it in some capacity, but we also know that there is a direct correlation between chronic stress and chronic inflammation. And we're going to cover kind of both of those topics in terms of stress and inflammation today. So let's just start there. How exactly are those two connected in terms of how the body responds to stress? And when we're responding to stress, does that lead to increased inflammation as well?
Yes, a big topic. So many people are dealing with this right now. So I'm glad that we're diving deep. So actually our first response to stress is our nervous system. So our nervous system is already generally overstimulated. And then when it's compacted with a big stressor that's in the forefront, this is where our nervous system reacts. And then it sends that messaging to the HPA axis, which is that hypothalamus and pituitary, HP, located in the brain. And then adrenals above the kidneys, that's the A, and then the axis. So this becomes a negative feedback loop when you're dealing with chronic stress. So the reaction nervous system into the HPA axis communicates to either cause an action, which might be to fight or to run away, whatever it may be. And so the negative feedback loop part is when it becomes consistent. And the stressors just keep flying at us and we keep having to react. And this is where our system, our body really becomes impaired. And this is where all systems in this body will shut down if you're in fight mode or if you're in flight mode. And so this is how it does really impact our health overall, of course, causing inflammation to rise. So that's what we'll be getting into, what that might look like too.
Yes. And we know with stress, like as you said, it's coming from all different angles. Like we have stress at home life, we have stress at our job, we have stress internally as well. Like our digestive system's off, we're constipated, those types of things. So many areas of stress. And for the average individual who could say like, yes, I'm very stressed. I have feelings of like heightened emotions, or I'm feeling like very fatigued. I'm not sleeping well. Like those are some like common signs we see with people who are stressed. Now, when it comes to having that stress response leading to that chronic inflammation response, how might those symptoms show up in someone's life? Like we know the obvious, joint inflammation, but like what other signs and symptoms might be important for our listeners to know that could say, okay, there's something going on here and our inflammation is increasing?
Yeah, so kind of working off of what you mentioned, the first obvious is that joint pain, or just feeling uncomfortable maybe in our body and certain tightness or tension. But I feel like the piece to that is we think that is our normal, and that we're just sticking to that. And then that is, oh, I've always had this pain. Oh, and this is just normal. I've had this bum knee or tension in my neck, and it's not getting out, and we're not dealing with that. So those physical signs are something we really do need to look out for. That is kind of showing that inflammation has really risen, to impact our tissues, our joints, our bones, and everything like that. So that's kind of on the more severe end, I would say, while looking at other systems in the body, because when stress rises, you've got our systems in the body that are being impaired. And kind of the first signs I would be saying, it would be, of course, mood, right? If it's irregularities with what your day-to-day spirit looks like, your emotions, mood swings, increase of sadness, that kind of thing. I feel the brain fogginess as well. That's something that can be a direct impact. Of course, sleep problems that can show just the inflamed detoxification pathways. So you may not be detoxifying during the night as we're supposed to be, and maybe you're waking up at certain times of the night, or you're having troubles going to sleep. And so supporting what your stress levels look like, so your inflammation is reduced during your sleep, is really important. And then digestion, that's another factor of what some symptoms might look like. So irregular bowel movements, and what that means is you should be making a daily bowel movement. I don't want people to look at, a normal bowel movement as every other day or every third day, right? As we intake, we need to eliminate. And when we're stressed, this doesn't flow properly. And then you might see things like constant bloating and gas, acid reflux or heartburn. That's a common link to our stress response as well, which maybe many listeners don't know, but that's a big one too. So there's a lot of kind of signs and symptoms to look out for when stress rises, and how inflammation might appear in the body.
Yes. And I think it's so important to bring awareness to, because we think of inflammation as being that only immediate, physical response, right? Mm-hmm. But we know that it's so much more above that. And you quickly touched on the effects it has on our mental well-being and our mood, and how that can fluctuate. Let's talk a little bit more about anxiety, depression. We know that stress can really heighten the effects, or the, physical impact of anxiety and depression. But what correlation does that have to inflammation? Are they related? Are they two separate things? What do our listeners need to know?
Right. Okay. So that's a very big topic, but I'll kind of put it in a simple terms, is how when inflammation rises, plaque buildup happens, free radicals are circulating throughout the brain-blood barrier. So this is how it starts to affect our brain functioning. If it's just, memory lapses or brain fog, or maybe what some people call brain farts. And then if that stress, that inflammation is consistent, well, this is how we're going to see more severe signs appear. And this is how it can fall into, say, anxiety or mild depression or something like that. And this is where it starts to affect our hormones, when it's ongoing stress, ongoing inflammation, free radicals circulating in the body. And so this affects our happy hormones. This is where dopamine and serotonin will be reduced. this is where melatonin, our sleep hormone, so going back to maybe why our sleep is impaired too. And so this is where it can really start seeing those signs of anxiety or depression appear.
All good points. And I think we forget about how interconnected all of the pathways, all of the systems, the entire body are connected. As you said, hormones, and you quickly touched about how that negative feedback loop that's occurring when we are in a state of stress, resulting in some inflammation and other imbalances of the body. So can you talk a little bit more about potentially strategies that we could use to break that cycle of the chronic stress leading to that elevated level of inflammation through the body?
Yes, of course. That's the big one, right? We want to provide those solutions. And I guess I probably should have started with letting everyone know. I don't want to stress people out by this conversation, right? So stress is normal. We're all dealing with it. And our body reacts differently. How my body reacts to stress is going to be different than yours. And so this is where how we react and what that action looks like internally, externally really does make a difference. So when we're in that state of fight and flight, and that HPA axis is just circulating. It's this negative feed loop that gets just going at 120 kilometers an hour, and we're feeling that pressure. Locating where you feel it in your body is a really big one. Actually, I'm heading to a silent meditation retreat for a good few days upcoming. And a big part of it is sitting in silence, meditating, seeing what thoughts appear and where those thoughts land in your physical body, and then sending your breath, which is really oxygen, into that part of the body to relax it. And that's kind of the connection between thoughts and pain that might arise in the body, and then our breath. And so the biggest tip to, when you're dealing with that stress, just take even just one breath. And well, you're always, of course, a deep, good, solid breath, and just take that moment. I know for myself, I hold my stress. It's in my chest, it's in my neck, and then my jaw starts to tighten. And I just know if I just kind of, I can feel that ease right away. What about you, Marissa? Where do you find that you hold your stress? How does that appear in your body?
Literally the exact same. And I literally went like, it's so giddy when you said you were going to a silent retreat. First, I have to ask, have you ever been to a silent retreat before?
Yes, I did. I've done the 10 days. So now in the program, you're a senior student, so you can go back for 3 to 4 day refreshers. So it's really a great lifelong kind of program.
So I did a yoga teacher training, and at the end of my yoga teacher training, I did a 3-day silent retreat. And then I went back and did, I think it was 4 or 5 days. This was many years ago. And the very first time that I did a silent retreat, I felt just like stillness, like quietness. But then the second time I went, I think it was a silent retreat, but I sobbed the entire time, because exactly what you said is that holding in the heart of so many things, right? The expectations of you put on yourself, the expectations you have like in your family or your profession or whatever that might be. And when you quiet it and you're intentional with your breath, and, being in a state of calm where you can actually think through the feelings of what you're feeling internally, what you're feeling like around you, your surroundings, it is like transformational. So we know breath meditation in that sense is so underutilized. It's free. We can just sit and breathe and make the biggest impact on our health and wellness. And when I suggest breathing, people are like, I'm always breathing. No, it's not the same. Sitting, slow, deep, intentional, full breaths, not little chest breaths, full belly breaths, full relaxation of the shoulders. So beneficial. And I'm so glad you brought that as a point, because it's, as I mentioned, accessible for everybody to do, and can be, so pivotal. Maybe not 10 days if you're just starting out, but sitting in silence. And I remember too, not to get off track here, but when I was in yoga teacher training and they talked about the ability to quiet the mind and to breathe, one of the challenges was, for the first hour of waking up, was no talking, no noises, no nothing, like no music, no TV. And I remember driving to my yoga teacher training and no radio, and sitting in that silence and just focusing on slowly getting there and slowly breathing. Even just that, like I feel so calm just thinking about that time. Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
I see
Amazing.
that in you. I see that in you for sure. And I mean, if we could all just start our days that way, I feel like there'd be a lot more calmness and just stability throughout the day,
Yes.
because that's where we get off kilter when we're not grounded. And then we can rise too high or sink too low. So going back to, yeah, that the simplicity of just the deep breaths.
Yeah, I love it. As I said, that's very accessible for pretty much
Mhm.
everybody to just take those slow, deep breaths to try and break that cycle of the constant rush and that constant stimulation of our nervous system. And I know we're going to get people who are like, okay, I'll try it, but what else can I do? So I want to talk a little bit more about the holistic approaches to managing stress, because it's not as simple as being like, okay, I'm just not going to be stressed about this or not going to be stressed about that. It's all about how we're setting ourselves up to manage that type of stress and in those stressful situations. So in terms of ingredients, that's what I want to talk about next. Are there specific ingredients that you recommend that can do both combating stress and also with inflammation in the back of our mind as well?
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of wonderful herbs, and this is kind of the focus that it's an added layer that needs to be incorporated because our stressors are just to the max these days. So we need these tools. And so looking at how Living Alchemy can help is that we have a lot of these herbs that we utilize, and they're fermented. And so that enhances the profile. So looking at some of these ingredients, ashwagandha, I'm sure you've heard of this. Ashwagandha, it's been very popular for a few years now, and it's all, given its reputation, it's worth it to give a try because it helps a lot of people from everywhere, from high stress levels to concentration to mild anxiety. It even helps with metabolism and sleep for people. So there's a wide array of benefits to ashwagandha. I really like it for energy as well, that daily strength to get through our day. So there's ashwagandha. That's a great one. And then rhodiola, that is one that more people are becoming aware of, which I'm so pleased about. And rhodiola really helps for boosting stamina, energy, cultivating that inner fire that maybe we've been missing. So if you're finding your stress is low energy, low spirit, you need some of that ignition, more of that yang energy to come up. And so that's where I'd look to rhodiola. I love Living Alchemy's rhodiola alive because we include astragalus. Astragalus is an immuno supportive. And so it's just further helping with the immune system, because when we're stressed, inflammation's rising. So our immune system is also being impacted. So supporting the immune system is really important. And something like astragalus would really help with that too. It's also an adaptogen herb, which helps with stress too. And then there's my favorite, holy basil. Have you tried holy basil as a
Oh,
supplement? I know lots of people
I
tried it as a tea, but as a supplement. Do you
next
enjoy
level,
it? Yeah.
next level. It
Yeah.
really
So
like it's like that ashwagandha and rhodiola I find are that perfect balance of like when you're too stressed, but also the mood. Like for me personally, like if I'm feeling that really low, I feel like that combo really gets me to a good place. But that holy basil, it's just like this sprinkle of sparkle that's just like, I feel
yes.
so good.
Yeah. I like to call it my Zen chill pill kind of thing. So I'll use this one at the end. I work from home if I'm not traveling, and that kind of 5 o'clock kind of unwind into my evening to do that like work-life balance. So I'll take my I'll take my holy basil. I'm a three capsules from Living Alchemy. Take three, and it just helps me ease into my evening if it's going into an evening meditation or a yoga practice, just to kind of chill. I know also just, taking some holy basil instead of reaching for a wine glass, because a lot of us reach for wine to cope with, or, alcohol, whatever, spirits, whatever it may be, to cope with the stress that's coming on. So I really like using obviously natural herbs to help when we can. And so that's holy basil. And what's a superstar with Living Alchemy is that we've created one product that's called Stress Less. So there you go. There's a solution. And it's these 3 herbs actually in one capsule. And that's fermented ashwagandha, fermented rhodiola, and fermented holy basil, all in the Stress Less. Plus, we put in just a little sprinkle of California poppy, which is just really helping to support that nervous system. So that first initial reaction with stress, that's how California poppy is really going to help to calm that nervous system. So our HPA axis can assess, adjust, and not be overstimulated and keep that negative feedback loop always cycling. So I really like Stress Less. It's just 1 capsule is all I need of that one because it's so much more potent and stronger. So Stress Less is for those listeners that are going through high adrenal fatigue, high trauma, high job loss, family member loss, dealing with some deep emotional, maybe suffering, pain, that kind of thing. So Stress Less is kind of that stronger, potent version. And then lastly, I would just say when you're under stress, obviously we know inflammation rises, so always be incorporating a turmeric. And Living Alchemy has a really potent fermented turmeric where all the curcumins are even more elevated because of that fermentation process.
I have not tried Stress Less personally, but I have several testimonies from our staff and like some from such a variety of ages as well. We have staff members who are students in high school and they are taking it to combat the stress of exams and swear by it. We have staff members who just have very busy lives that are moms, things are going, always busy, and they rely on this product so much. They love it. It is the next product on my to try list, but I will say the turmeric, I love this product so much. One, it's fermented, it's easy to digest. I love the formulation, but what we know about stress and inflammation, and we've talked about today, and also many other people are talking about, is I would say if you are stressed, you definitely have inflammation. It might not be extremely high or to the part where it's like debilitating your day-to-day life, but we can guarantee that if you have a high stress level, you have some type of inflammation going on. But we know that turmeric also has amazing antioxidants, which is so great for longevity, vitality, all of those things. So everybody can pretty well benefit from both of these products if you're under any type of stress. And we know that, hand in hand, that inflammation goes with that. So let's stay on the topic about Living Alchemy. I know this might seem biased because you work for Living Alchemy and I love Living Alchemy, but they're such a unique, amazing company. And I want you to share why Living Alchemy's herbal supplements are different than other supplements that are on the market and how amazing they are.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Well, first and foremost, I should say Living Alchemy is actually Canadian owned. We're independently owned as well. So that's a big piece of who we are and what makes us different and how that integrity is so high with our products. And that leads into how our fermentation process is so unique. And that's what makes our product so different and effective for our customers. And so we use a living culture fermentation. So we utilize kefir and kombucha to ferment whole organic turmeric root or whole organic ashwagandha root. And this is over a long period of time, a good few days, weeks, depending on what part of the herb is used. If it's a root or like holy basil leaves, ferments quicker. And so when you utilize something that's fermented, you're getting a lot of the beneficial microbes, the postbiotics, those short chain fatty acids, those enzymes. So when you're under stress, your digestive system is paused, it's impaired. And so this is why it's really important to take a herbal supplement, a herbal aid during those times of stress that's actually digestible, that's actually able to assimilate, able to break down, to be used in the body and be eliminated too, right? Because we know bowel congestion is a thing when we're stressed. And so this is a big part of what makes our supplements so beneficial and so effective for our customers, including we've got third-party research about how our fermented rhodiola continues to be effective as opposed to, say, an unfermented version of rhodiola after 14 to 21 days. So it's continuously working during those signs of stress, which is really important because, for that long-term haul of that HPA access always kind of being off balance, this is where having a adaptogen herb to help with stress is actually working. You don't want to be wasting your money. So I totally get that. And yeah, finding the right one that works for you, the right herb.
Absolutely. So you quickly touched on talking about parts of the herb, the whole herb, the roots, things like that. Is it better to choose formulations that are using the whole herb, or is it that it's better for just extracts of the herb? What is your professional opinion?
Yeah, so there are a lot of products on the shelf. I know how overwhelming and confusing it can be. I always look at how we utilize Mother Nature, what Mother Nature gives us, and how what's the natural process of how we should be utilizing this plant that we've been given. And so that is, we don't extract this curcumin. When we make a curry, we actually use and sprinkle in turmeric. So that's my belief as an individual, as a practitioner that I share, that's Living Alchemy's belief. That's why I work for them, that we utilize the whole plant and respect the integrity of the plant. That's really essential. So you don't want to lose that holistic intention when you're manufacturing, when you're producing, when you're fermenting. That needs to be passed along to that end user to feel that holistic difference. And that's where, yeah, I'm all for whole herb, utilizing that, enhancing it through fermentation. So you're still getting those active constituents to be very therapeutic. And that's through a natural fermentation process.
I completely agree. And I like that goes across the board, not even just as like nutritionists and talking about whole food-based, whole everything forward, but also there are other benefits that, might get thrown out if you're not using the entire herb. It is so magical as a whole. So I love that. And I think that's important to highlight. So we touched on key ingredients, key supplements, which again, I love. And we know that they can be incredibly supportive, whether it's more long-term or short-term. But if we aren't necessarily at the point of adding in supplements per se, what about other lifestyle factors that our listeners could use to support their stress response starting today?
Yes. So looking at what you're intaking today, is it processed food? Is it whole food? You should align, start making that shift from processed foods away from that into whole food ingredients and whole food, homemade ingredients and everything like that. So that's, what you're intaking currently. Always lots of good, clean water, making sure you have the right source of that. A big one is that, especially, in Canada, is vitamin D right now, getting outside and soaking up all the vitamin D you can. That's a big one. And getting outside, that's where you're really going to connect. And that's a natural stress relief right there. That fresh air, the trees, the grounding, the being on earth. I'd actually tell, as a practitioner, I'd be telling someone that's in high stress, you don't need to be going for long runs or going to the gym. You actually need to take a break and take a pause, and because already that is going to raise inflammation, and in a negative state if you're already in your adrenals are impacted. And this is where I'd be suggesting going outside and doing those long walks, or meditating outside, or going for a hike, or connecting, swimming outside, anything like that. And doing more of that internal work. And that's a big piece of it for sure.
Yes, to all of the above. And I think it's our job as practitioners, educators, people who are inspiring people to live wellness on purpose now, is getting rid of the noise. Because we know on social media, let's use that exercise as an example. We see some people go, exercise is a stress relief, exercise is this. It can be, when you are in that threshold to manage that stress response. But if you are in a chronic state of stress, riddled with chronic inflammation, and you are doing heavy, intense workouts, you are draining what little cortisol you have left, if any. Whereas, as you said, recommending the walks, recommending that low impact, the stretching, the internalization, the breathing, slow it down, let go of that idea of going to the gym 5-6 days a week. Because if you're doing that and you're not seeing any results, it's a very clear sign that that's not the the best option for moving your body. It's important to move your body, but in the right way. So love that you brought awareness to that. And then I want to circle back to actually what you consume, because we know that there's certain foods that increase inflammation and increase stress, like foods we can't digest or foods that are heavily processed. And there is a big emphasis on removing foods from your diet. But we also need to talk about the mindset, or sorry, I guess the narrative around removing things and not putting things back into your diet as well. If you are removing things or restricting things, let's say carbohydrates for an example, because we see that, at least I see that so often, right? Restricting carbohydrates, that stress around fear of eating carbohydrates. People, it's creating a stress response, increasing your inflammation, and it's not creating a healthy relationship. So let's come back to that wholesome approach, eating whole foods, nutritious foods, foods that make you feel good mentally, physically, emotionally, and even just being mindful of what the foods are that you consume on a daily basis.
Yes, exactly. No, that is what is going to just the relationship. That's a big piece of it, right? Because that'll cause a lot of harm if you're overthinking it, and that you're just causing your own stress, and that's what we don't want to happen. And then the cycle continues again. So I feel like that's a good addition. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yes. Now, I want to kind of come back to the common narrative around stress and inflammation. Now, we know that this conversation is big, and I could sit on this podcast and talk for hours with you on both of these conversations. But one thing I think we can agree on is that we have developed this narrative where stress is bad because it's over consuming a lot of our lives, our relationships, our work life. It's coming, affecting so many things. And we know that it's also impacting a lot of systems in our body, including increasing that inflammation. And we can't just get rid of it, which we talked about already. We can't just get rid of everything that causes stress. What we want to do is set ourselves up to be able to modulate our bodies mentally, physically, and emotionally through stress, and really build long-term resilience to stress. So how do you think we can really start to shift this narrative and change the conversation amongst our consumers, customers, and also within our health and wellness community?
So about those lasting improvements of how we can really build that long-term resilience, that's where it's going to be about mindset. It's going to be mind over matter, the biology of belief, the like attracts like. All these ideologies are in fact our natural way of being. And so this is where there's always going to be stress that rises in life, and how we deal with it and how we look at it and what's our perspective on it. This is where I truly believe that positivity builds that resilience. Getting rid of what's negative around you where possible, of course, we have to be realistic. But what's stressing you out, just making sure you surround yourself in a loving home, around the core people that you trust, that make a positive impact, that you can do things that bring you joy, and that you see that you can try to make the steps to shift your perspective. And doing that is definitely hard. It doesn't, it's not like flipping a switch. It really starts with being present and being in the now, and seeing if this stress right now that you're encountering, is it going to affect your life at this moment, or is it going to affect your life tomorrow or in 2 years? And that's where it's stand back, take some time, space, breathe. And that's the moment where it's just like, okay, let's just see here and now what this looks like. And then you give yourself time and space to then change your perspective and try to just start shifting slowly, and how that might look for you, and try to create this more of a future, a positive outlook for your future, and see how, stress, it can be exciting too. It can be engaging. It's a beautiful part of what makes life so interesting, but really seeing as things happen for a reason, and how that blessing really might appear in your life. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. I hope that is something that we can have our listeners really connect with themselves and take that moment for themselves, I think is really important.
So important. And I don't know who said it. Maybe it was Mel Robbins or somebody. They really talked about summarizing what you just said. Is it a right now problem? Is it something that we can solve within 5 minutes? Or is it something that we're solving in a week, in a year, in 10 years? And if it's, longer than your week time frame, is it worth stressing over right now? And also, if it's something that's only 5 minutes, is it worth stressing this much about if it's only taking up 5 minutes of your life? And it's such a way, when we can get into that mindset, we see that grace move through our whole lives, right? How we show up, how we prioritize whom we spend time with, what type of job we decide to work for or career to have. So I'm so happy you brought awareness to what is right now, what is short term, and what is long term, because we can get so caught up and always trying to reach the next level or the next goal. And sometimes we just need to take a breath, as we said, and take a step and just evaluate, be so incredibly grateful for what we have, where we are, and build that resilience from there. So I'm so, so happy you brought that to our listeners today. And I'm so happy you were able to just kind of, cover all of that as a beneficial next step for our listeners. Irene, I need to thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast and shedding some light on this critical topic, and for introducing us to the innovative approach of Living Alchemy Stress Less, as well as the Alive Turmeric. Those are both amazing products. And I know that our listeners are going to really appreciate the information that you've shared to address the impact of stress and chronic inflammation today. And hopefully they can take your recommendations and make a significant step forward to achieving overall well-being. So I want to thank you so much. And I really look forward to whatever our next conversation is.
Yes, me too. Thanks so much for having me again. It's always a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll connect again soon.
Absolutely. Quick disclaimer here, any information shared on the Wellness on Purpose podcast is not intended to treat, diagnose, or for the prescription of any medication. Please contact your healthcare professional before use and for further information. If you're still here, thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. If you want to learn more about the topics that we covered in today's episode, as well as the products, you've got two options. You can head over to our Joanne's Place website to review the show notes. We'll leave that in the description below. Or you can pop into one of our Joanne's Place locations and talk to one of our amazing staff. Just a reminder, if you haven't already, go over to your preferred platform, follow our page, and then find us over on social media so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. That's all for now, and we'll see you in the next episode.